During the same tumultuous 63 BC year that saw Cicero arm men within the Pomerium, execute citizens without trial, and cement his reputation with the conservatives, the Pontifex Maximus, Quintus Caecilius Metellus Pius, died. Against two other priests from within the College of Pontiffs, Caesar, already campaigning for the praetorship for the 62 BC year, immediately began campaigning for the office of Pontifex Maximus as well. One of Caesar's opponents was the same Marcus Calpurnius Bibulus with whom Caesar had shared the aedileship, and who despised Caesar for it. More moneys were borrowed from various sources in Caesar's pursuit of Rome's state priesthood. In Bibulus's pursuit of the office, accusations resurfaced that Caesar was the Queen of Bithynia, and allegations of bribery were leveled at every candidate. On the day of the election for Pontifex Maximus, Caesar is alleged to have said to his mother, "Today you will see me either Pontifex Maximus, or an exile," due to the ever-increasing amount of debts Caesar had incurred in pursuit of these high offices. 41 years earlier, in 104 BC, upon the death of the Pontifex Maximus, Metellus Dalmaticus, who had been father of Sulla's fourth wife, Dalmatica, a senator named Lucius Domitius Enobarbus became the first non-pontiff to be elected to the office. Enobarbus fought back against the College of Pontiffs when they did not automatically co-opt him into the college upon the death of his father, who had been a pontiff, but chose instead to co-opt the tribune, Marcus Livius Drusus. Using a plebeian tribune of his own, legislation called the Lex Domitia was passed that transferred election of a Pontifex Maximus out of the hands of the College of Pontiffs, and into the hands of the tribal voting assembly. Following his death, the next Pontifex Maximus, Quintus Mucius Scaevola, was also elected by the tribal assembly. The Lex Domitia was abolished in 81 BC by the dictator Sulla, and the College of Pontiffs was once again given the right to co-opt one of their own to office, following, of course, Sulla's dictator-appointed Pontifex Maximus, Metellus Pius. Since both of Caesar's rivals were better qualified, Caesar needed a means of capitalizing on his vast popularity with the masses. The same tribune of the plebs, Titus Labienus, who had filed charges against Gaius Rabirius for his role in the murder of Saturninus, managed to successfully abolish Sulla's law, which had abolished the Lex Domitia. This, like all his campaigns, would have cost Caesar a great deal of bribe money, but, in 63 BC, Gaius Julius Caesar was duly elected to the office of Pontifex Maximus by the tribal assembly, despite the fact that both his opponents were more experienced. Taking his mother, Aurelia Cotta, his wife, Pompeia Sulla, and his 13-year-old daughter, Julia, Caesar moved from his current address into the Regia, in the heart of the Forum Romanum. Once there, Caesar officially added the 6 virgins of Vesta to the manus, or legal responsibility, of his role as paterfamilias. On the heels of his election as Pontifex Maximus, Caesar also won election as praetor for the 62 BC year. After Cicero stepped down as consul at the end of the 63 BC year, having executed the ringleaders of the Catilina conspiracy, the small rebel army to the north of Rome had not yet been defeated. Immediately into the new year, a tribune of the plebs named Metellus Nepos put a bill before the Senate to recall Pompeius Magnus and his armies from the east, so that he might take command of the city. Marcus Porcius Cato vehemently opposed this bill, claiming that the conspiracy was now under control, and Rome had 2 perfectly competent consuls who could take care of an insignificant army of rebels. But Nepo's bill was about more than a small army. It was about Cicero executing Roman citizens without trial. Metellus Nepos called Cato a coward, threatening to ignore the Senate's advice on this subject, and take the bill directly to the People's Assembly. But Cato knew what had happened the last time someone took control of the city. Sulla had installed himself as dictator, then systematically murdered all of his political opponents. And, because Pompeius had been one of Sulla's lieutenants, Cato was determined not to see history repeat itself. Metellus Nepos did as he threatened, and took his bill to the People's Assembly, without senatorial approval. Cato, accompanied by another tribune of the plebs named Thermus, attended the assembly in order to veto the proceedings. When Metellus Nepos began proceedings by reading the bill aloud, Cato immediately vetoed it. But Metellus Nepos continued reading the bill. Cato vetoed again, this time snatching the bill from Metellus Nepos' hands. But Metellus Nepos, who had written the bill, continued reciting it from memory. At this point, Thermus tried to prevent Metellus Nepos from speaking by clapping his hands over his mouth. The dispute over Metellus Nepos' bill, which Caesar supported, reached its breaking point when Metellus shouted to his supporters to go and get the armed men who waited at home, that they might come and make the people afraid. Once again, the Senate considered invoking the Senatus Consultum Ultimum, though it had just been used within previous months. The point Caesar had made with the case against Gaius Rabirius was becoming abundantly clear. The Senate was growing ever more comfortable, and quick, to reach for the emergency state powers of the Senatus Consultum Ultimum, to use as a weapon against political opponents. As the crowd began throwing stones at Cato, the new consul for the 62 BC year, Lucius Licinius Murena, approached the forum. A rumor quickly spread through the mob that the consul's lictors were armed with swords. Although this was illegal, the fact that Cicero had allowed swords within the city meant that the people now believed it a possibility. The precedent had been set, and the people quickly dispersed. Following Nepo's attempt to present his bill to the plebeian assembly, and the realization that the crowd was not as solidly with him as he had hoped, Nepos left the city in protest. Tribunes of the plebs were forbidden from leaving the city during their terms of office. Yet, considering the list of illegalities that had transpired with the executions of Roman citizens without trial, the arming of men within Rome's sacred boundary, and the physical impediment of a tribune of the plebs performing his duty to the people, no one cared about one lone plebeian tribune fleeing to Pompeius Magnus in Anatolia. When the whole affair had ended, the Senate endorsed Cato's handling of the situation. The Senate next moved to strip Metellus Nepos of his tribunate, not for leaving the city, but for inciting an insurrection. Cato, however, opposed this motion, and it did not pass. When Metellus Nepos left the city, Caesar, who had publicly sided with Nepos, renounced his praetorship in solidarity with the absent tribune of the plebs. The following day, an angry mob assembled outside the Regia. There, they urged Caesar to lead him in a march against the Senate. Caesar, however, made it clear that he, as a Roman senator, mindful of the responsibilities owed the high levels of office he held, would take no part in such treasonous violence. Disappointed, and possibly shamed, the people dispersed and went home. For refusing to storm the Senate ahead of a violent mob, the Senate, impressed with Caesar's statesmanship, restored to him the office he had just resigned. Cato, however, was against restoring Caesar to the office of praetor. He did not trust him, and believed Caesar had played some nefarious, subtle role in Catilina's conspiracy, and had simply managed not to get caught. So convinced of Caesar's involvement was he that, during the debates led by Cicero about the Catilina conspiracy, Cato had seen a note slip discreetly into Caesar's hand. Believing the note to be from Catilina's conspirators, Cato called Caesar out in front of the Senate, and ordered the note be read aloud. Much to Cato's embarrassment, a love letter from his married sister, Servilia Caepionis, was read aloud to the entire Senate. Although Cato's haste forced Caesar's and Servilia's affair into the public realm, it did not confirm any role in Catilina's conspiracy. But, Cato still believed Caesar had been involved. And now, he suspected Caesar of playing some peripheral role in the Metellus Nepos affair as well. From 62 BC on, Cato would join forces with Marcus Calpurnius Bibulus in his hatred and suspicion of Caesar, and consider him an archenemy. Not that Caesar gave much thought to the opinions of Cato and Bibulus. As the state's highest priest, Caesar had far more significant matters on his mind. As the chaos of the 62 BC year continued, Caesar's family was touched by a scandal of such unholy proportions, that the utter heresy of it caused some of Rome's women to toss their newborns into the streets.